The thing about teaching advanced weapons theory to alien cadets, Cormac had learned over his 8 years at the Galactic Defense Academy, was that they all thought they knew everything. Every single one of them arrived with their plasma rifles and particle disruptors and graviton cannons, convinced that humanity had contributed absolutely nothing to military technology except perhaps the concept of showing up unprepared. Which was why Cormac was currently standing in the center of Weapons Range Alpha, holding a battered leather case that looked older than some of the cadets' home planets. While Tavish and Lysandra tried very hard not to laugh directly at him, they were failing. "Instructor Cormac," Tavish said, his elongated ears perked forward in what Cormac had learned was the Iridian equivalent of barely suppressed glee. The desert-adapted alien's pale sand-colored skin seemed to glow under the range's harsh white lighting, and his amber eyes tracked the case like it might contain a particularly disappointing sandwich. Is that a historical artifact? Should we contact the museum?" Lysandra didn't bother hiding her smile. The Stellarith cadet stood with one hand resting on her hip, her bronze skin's metallic undertones shifting slightly toward a coppery amusement. The backward curving horns integrated into her skull caught the light as she tilted her head. "I believe antiques are handled by the Cultural Preservation Department, Tavish. Perhaps Instructor Cormac took a wrong turn." "No wrong turn," Cormac said, setting the case down on the reinforced composite table with a thunk that echoed through the sterile white room. The holographic targets downrange flickered in their idle patterns, waiting. The energy weapon charging stations along the left wall hummed their constant background note. Right place, right time, right lesson. Tavish's ears twitched backward skeptically. The lesson is titled, "Advanced Kinetic Projectile Systems and Their Modern Applications." "Surely you don't mean?" "I do mean." Lysandra's violet eyes narrowed with the particular look of someone who suspected they were being pranked but couldn't figure out how. Her tribal pattern markings along her collarbones seemed to darken slightly. Kinetic projectiles were abandoned 6 centuries ago. They're inefficient, loud, require ammunition storage, and can't penetrate modern shielding. 7 centuries, Tavish corrected, because of course he did. His claw-tipped fingers drummed against his own weapons case. "And that's being generous. Some species never use them at all." Cormac opened his case. The rifle inside looked like it had been through a war, which it had. 3 of them actually, but Cormac didn't mention that. The woodstock was scratched and worn smooth by decades of handling. The metal barrel had the dull patina of something that had been maintained religiously but never babied. The scope mounted on top was newer, but only in the sense that it was from this century. Tavish's ears flattened completely against his skull. "That's a museum piece." "That's a Remington Model 700, Cormac said, lifting it out with the casual care of someone handling a familiar tool. "Chambered in .308 Winchester. Bolt action. Capacity of 4+1 in the chamber. Effective range of about 800 meters with the right ammunition and shooter." Lysandra had gone very still, which Cormac had learned meant she was recalculating something. Her skin's metallic undertones had shifted to a confused bronze green he'd never seen before. "You're joking. This is performance art. You're making a point about obsolescence." "I'm making a point about assumptions," Cormac said, running his hand along the barrel. "But first, how about you two show me what you've got? Let's see the modern stuff." That perked them right back up. Tavish practically lunged for his weapons case, those elongated ears swiveling forward again. "Gladly." "Lysandra, standard demonstration protocol?" "Targeting sequence theta," she agreed, moving to her own case with the fluid grace that came from her long-legged athletic build. "Holographic progression, moving targets, shield penetration test." They assembled their weapons with the kind of synchronized efficiency that came from doing something 1,000 times. Tavish's plasma rifle was a sleek Iridian military model, all angular sand-colored plating and cooling vents that glowed a soft blue when he activated it. Lysandra's weapon was pure Stellarith engineering, elegant curves, biomechanical integration points, and a power cell that hummed at a frequency Cormac could feel in his back teeth. "Range parameters set," Tavish announced, his amber eyes flickering toward the control panel he'd accessed with his offhand. Downrange, the holographic targets shifted into a complex pattern. "Standard combat scenario, multiple hostiles, various ranges, Class 3 defensive shielding." Lysandra took position at the firing line, her midnight hair falling forward as she shouldered her rifle. "Tracking engaged, firing in 3, 2, her weapon sang. That was the only word for it. The particle beam that lanced downrange made a sound like a crystal choir having a seizure, and the first holographic target's shield flared, flickered, and died. The target behind it exploded into pixels. Tavish was already firing before the first target finished dissolving. His plasma rifle made a deeper thrumming sound, and superheated bolts punched through 2 more shields in rapid succession. The smell of ozone-filled weapons range alpha. They moved through the sequence like a dance they'd choreographed. Lysandra took high-value targets, her violet eyes tracking solutions faster than the targeting computer. Tavish covered the close-range threats, his lean frame absorbing the weapon's recoil with practiced ease. Shields died, targets exploded. The cooling vents on both weapons glowed brighter. 30 seconds later, the range was clear. "Standard qualification performance," Tavish said, not quite managing to sound humble about it. His ears were fully forward, practically quivering with satisfaction. Time, 28.3 seconds. Accuracy, 94%. Shield penetration, 100%. Lysandra lowered her weapon, and her bronze skin's metallic sheen had shifted back to a pleased copper. Ammunition expenditure, 42 rounds equivalent. Energy cell consumption, 18%. 0 malfunctions. She glanced at Cormac. "This is the baseline you wanted us to establish?" "That's real impressive," Cormac said, and meant it. "Serious skills. Now watch this." He walked to the firing line, carrying the rifle like a man carrying a briefcase to work. Behind him, he heard Tavish whisper something to Lysandra in their shared trade language. Cormac's translator implant caught the words "ceremonial demonstration" and "cultural significance" and "please let this be quick." The observation window overlooking the range had acquired a few faces. Word spread fast at the academy when something weird was happening. Cormac ignored them. "Range parameters," he called out. "Single target, stationary, no shields, 300 meters. Tavish's ears did a complicated twist that suggested he was trying very hard not to say something. 300 meters. "Instructor, my plasma rifle is accurate to 1500 meters. Lysandra's particle beam can hit targets at 300 meters, Cormac repeated. He worked the bolt, chambering around with a mechanical chunk clack that sounded absurdly loud after the sci-fi symphony of the energy weapons. One shot. Lysandra's horns vibrated slightly. One shot to prove what, exactly? That primitive kinetic weapons can hit a stationary target at close range? We could throw rocks and accomplish the same? The sound of Cormac's rifle firing was like the universe's rudest interruption. It wasn't a hum, or a pulse, or a beam. It was a crack, sharp and violent, followed immediately by the metallic snap of the bolt working and the tinkle of a brass casing hitting the floor. Downrange, the holographic target registered a perfect center mass hit. Then the target behind it registered a hit. Then the reinforced barrier behind that target developed a crater the size of a fist. In the observation room overlooking the range, someone dropped something. Tavish's ears had gone completely flat against his skull, but not in amusement this time. His amber eyes were very wide. "That!" The round went through the target. "Holographic target," Lysandra corrected automatically, but her voice sounded distant. Her bronze skin had shifted to a pale gold color Cormac had never seen. There was nothing physical to go through. "Went through the space where a target would be," Cormac amended, safing his rifle, "and the hard light emitter, and the safety barrier, probably lodged in the wall plating now." He turned to face them. "Still want to talk about obsolete?" Tavish's claw-tipped fingers were flexing involuntarily. "That's not possible. Kinetic energy dissipation alone should have. The sound. Why was there so much sound? That's called a sonic report," Cormac said. "Happens when you push something faster than sound wants to go. In this case, a 150-grain copper-jacketed lead projectile moving about 2,700 feet per second. Lysandra had moved closer to the firing line, staring downrange at the crater in the barrier. Her violet eyes tracked back to the rifle. 2,700 feet per second. That's subsonic compared to particle beams. "Sure is, so it should be less effective." "Should be," Cormac agreed, "but it went through our hard light emitter, which is rated to project targets that can simulate Class 5 armor." It did do that. Tavish's ears were doing a complicated dance between forward and back, like they couldn't decide which emotion to express. "I don't understand. The kinetic energy required to penetrate that barrier, even accounting for the focused impact point. The projectile should have fragmented, disintegrated. The material stress alone." "Tavish," Lysandra interrupted, and her voice had gone very quiet. Her horns were vibrating steadily now. "What's the projectile made of?" "Lead core, copper jacket," Cormac said. "Little bit of brass in the casing, regular metals, nothing fancy." "Regular metals," she repeated. traveling at subsonic speeds compared to energy weapons, with no shield penetration capabilities, no plasma excitation, no particle acceleration, just metal. Just metal, Cormac confirmed. That's insane. That's physics. Tavish had crouched down to examine the brass casing on the floor, his lean frame folding with the efficient movement of someone built for desert navigation. He picked it up with his claw-tipped fingers, turning it over. This is the propellant housing. You're telling me that a chemical explosion, a controlled burn of primitive compounds generated enough force to… Yep. The Iridian's amber eyes swiveled up to meet Cormac's. Show me again. Can't, Cormac said, patting his rifle. Need to check the backstop first. Make sure we're not about to ventilate the hull. Safety third and all that. Lysandra's bronze skin had shifted through several colors in the last minute, finally settling on a confused pewter. Safety third? Old human saying, after efficiency in making a point. Cormac headed toward the equipment locker, a cramped metal-shelved room off the side of the range that smelled permanently of gun oil and old leather. Come on, I'll show you how to clean one of these. Then we'll talk about why your energy weapons are fantastic, right up until they meet someone who remembers how momentum works. Behind him, he heard Tavish say in a very small voice, his weapon is mechanical. It has moving parts. How is it more effective? Lysandra's response was barely a whisper. I think we need to recalculate everything. In the observation window, more faces had appeared. Someone was taking video. Someone else was arguing with someone else about physics. In the hallway outside Weapons Range Alpha, Cormac could hear running footsteps as word spread through the Academy's brushed metal corridors, past the recruitment posters showing sleek aliens with sleeker weapons, toward the administrative offices and probably the dean's desk. Cormac smiled. Give it 10 minutes and everyone would want a demonstration. Give it an hour and someone would ask the question he was waiting for. He glanced back at Tavish and Lysandra, who were both staring at the rifle in his hands like it had personally insulted their understanding of reality. So, Cormac said, his voice perfectly casual, who wants to go first? Tavish's hand shot up before Lysandra could move. His elongated ears perked so far forward they were practically horizontal. I'll do it. Whatever primitive chemical explosion device you're operating, I can operate it better. That's not how this works, Lysandra said, her violet eyes narrowing. The bronze of her skin had shifted back toward copper annoyance. You don't even understand the mechanism yet. Let someone with actual technical comprehension. You mean, let you go first because you're worried I'll figure it out faster. I mean, let me go first because your people still navigate by the stars like it's the expansion era. Tavish's amber eyes flashed. My people invented stellar cartography. Your people invented getting lost and calling it exploration. Cormac set the rifle down on the cleaning bench in the equipment locker and watched them bicker. The cramped metal shelf space was barely large enough for 3 people, especially when 2 of them were gesturing emphatically. A box of cleaning patches fell off a shelf. Neither alien noticed. Tell you what, Cormac said, pulling out a cleaning rod. Tavish goes first because he volunteered. Lysandra, you can watch and learn from his mistakes. I don't make mistakes, Tavish said automatically. Then this'll be educational for everyone. Cormac picked up the rifle again. First lesson, this is not a plasma rifle. You can't just point and shoot. Well, you can, but you'll probably break your shoulder and definitely miss the target. Lysandra's horns vibrated skeptically. Break his shoulder? It's a handheld weapon. How much recoil could a chemical explosion possibly? The rifle was heavier than Tavish expected. Cormac watched the Iridian cadet take it, watched those claw-tipped fingers try to find a grip on wood and metal that hadn't been designed for his hand shape. Tavish's lean frame shifted, trying to balance the weight distribution. It's unbalanced, Tavish said, his ears twitching backward in confusion. The center of gravity is completely wrong, and there's no power cell integration point, no neural link. How does it know where I'm aiming? You tell it where you're aiming, Cormac said. That's what the scope is for, the mechanical thing on top. Mechanical, Tavish repeated, like Cormac had just suggested navigating by interpretive dance. You mean I have to manually acquire the target, with my eyes, and then manually adjust for windage and elevation and range compensation and… Yup. Lysandra had leaned against the metal shelving, her midnight hair falling over one shoulder as she watched Tavish struggle. This is already amazing. Please continue. The stock goes against your shoulder, Cormac said, demonstrating with his hands. Tight. You want it pulled in firm, not held away from your body. That's how you manage the recoil. Tavish's ears flattened. You keep saying recoil like it's a significant factor. It's a projectile weapon. Basic physics says Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, Cormac interrupted. You're sending 150 grains of metal downrange at 2,700 feet per second. All that energy has to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is your shoulder. The Iridian cadet's pale, sand-colored skin had taken on a skeptical texture. I fired plasma rifles that output significantly more energy. The recoil is negligible. Plasma disperses, Lysandra said quietly, and both Cormac and Tavish turned to look at her. She was studying the rifle with those violet eyes, her bronze skin's metallic undertones shifting through calculation colors. Energy weapons release their payload in an expanding pattern. The recoil is distributed across the weapon's recoil compensation system and dissipated through heat venting. But this, she gestured at the rifle, this is throwing a solid mass. All the force in one direction, conservation of momentum. Exactly, Cormac said, slightly impressed. Tavish's ears swiveled toward Lysandra, then back to forward. So you're saying this antique weapon has more recoil than a military-grade plasma rifle because it's less sophisticated? I'm saying it has more recoil because it's more honest, Cormac said. Now shoulder it. Let's see if you can figure out the bolt. They moved back into weapons range Alpha, where the holographic targets had reset and the crater in the barrier was now surrounded by hazard tape. Someone had been in to assess the damage. Someone else had apparently decided to leave the crater as a teaching aid. Tavish positioned himself at the firing line, the rifle held awkwardly against his shoulder. His elongated ears were swiveling independently, trying to process all the sensory input. This feels wrong. Everything about this feels wrong. The weight distribution, the balance point, the lack of feedback systems. That's because you're thinking of it like an energy weapon, Cormac said, moving to stand beside him. Lysandra had taken up position slightly behind them, arms crossed, watching with the intensity of someone who planned to do this correctly on her first try. Energy weapons are about power management and heat dissipation. This is about consistency in physics. You're not managing energy flow. You're becoming part of a mechanical system. A mechanical system, Tavish echoed, made of wood and metal, designed centuries ago, and I'm supposed to work the bolt, Cormac said. Pull it up and back. That opens the breech. Tavish's claw-tipped fingers fumbled with the bolt. It took him 3 tries to get the motion right, and when he finally managed it, he jerked backward in surprise. It moved. The entire mechanism moved. I felt it move. That's how mechanical things work. But I can see inside it now. There's a space, an empty space. This is where the projectile goes? That's the chamber. Here. Cormac handed him a single round. Load it. Cartridge goes in the chamber, bolt forward and down to close it. The brass cartridge looked absurdly simple in Tavish's palm. He held it up to the light, amber eyes tracking the copper jacket of the bullet, the brass casing, the small primer at the base. This is the entire ammunition unit, propellant, projectile, ignition system, all in one disposable package. Efficient, right? It's insane. There's no power regulation, no charge indicator. How do I know if it's going to fire? You pull the trigger and find out, Cormac said. Load it. Tavish loaded the round with the careful precision of someone handling a potentially live grenade. The bolt closed with that distinctive mechanical chunk, and the Iridian's ears flattened completely. It's ready to fire, right now. There's a chemical reaction waiting to happen inside this mechanism I'm holding. Welcome to ballistic weapons, Cormac said. Now look through the scope. See that target downrange? Tavish pressed his face against the scope, then immediately pulled back. That's too close. Why is it so close? And there's something on the lens. Lines, numbers. What are the numbers for? Lysandra made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Her bronze skin had shifted to an entertained rose gold. Those are mil dots, Cormac explained, with the patience of someone who'd had this conversation before. They help you estimate range and compensate for bullet drop. See, unlike your particle beams, this projectile has to fight gravity the whole way to the target. Fight gravity, Tavish repeated. His ears had started doing that complicated twist again. Your weapon's projectile has to fight gravity, deliberately, as part of its design. Yep, that's the least efficient thing I've ever heard. That's projectile physics. Now aim at the target. It took Tavish almost 2 minutes to get comfortable with the scope picture. His breathing was wrong. His stance was wrong. His grip was definitely wrong. Cormac corrected each problem, watching the Iridian cadet slowly transform from a confident military trainee into someone who looked like he was trying to hug a particularly awkward piece of furniture. This is humiliating, Tavish muttered, his pale, sand-colored skin darkening with what might have been embarrassment. I've qualified expert on 6 different energy weapon systems. I can field strip a graviton cannon in under a minute, and I can't figure out how to hold a primitive projectile launcher." "You're doing fine," Cormac said. "Now breathe out slowly and squeeze the trigger." "Squeeze, not pull, squeeze. Gentle pressure, like you're trying not to wake it up." Tavish's claw-tipped finger found the trigger. Cormac saw the exact moment the Iridian started to squeeze, saw the tension build in that lean frame, saw the ears perk forward in anticipation. The rifle fired. Several things happened simultaneously. The rifle's recoil drove straight back into Tavish's shoulder, which wasn't properly positioned, which meant the force had nowhere to go except into rotating the Iridian cadet backward. Tavish made a sound like a startled desert predator. The rifle went up, Tavish went down. The brass casing ejected and hit Lysandra in the forehead. The bullet went somewhere, probably not toward the target. There was a moment of absolute silence. Then Lysandra started laughing. It was not a polite laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes from watching someone's confidence get physically knocked out of them by a chemical explosion. Her bronze skin had shifted through several colors before settling on a delighted champagne gold. Tavish was on the floor, still holding the rifle, his amber eyes wide enough to show colors Cormac hadn't known existed. Both ears were flat against his skull. "What?" he said in a very small voice. "Was that?" "That was recoil," Cormac said, offering a hand up. "Told you about that. You said it had recoil. You didn't say it had personal opinions about my existence." Tavish accepted the hand, stumbling upright. His claw-tipped fingers flexed involuntarily. "My entire shoulder just experienced a religious conversion. I saw my ancestors. They were disappointed." Lysandra was still laughing, one hand pressed against her collarbones where the tribal markings had darkened with amusement. "Expert on 6 weapon systems. Qualified sharpshooter. Defeated by primitive chemical explosion. This is the best day of my life." "You try it," Tavish shot back, his ears swiveling toward her aggressively. "See how you handle controlled violence in your hands." "Gladly." Lysandra stepped forward, her long-legged athletic build moving with confidence that was about to be severely tested. She held out one hand for the rifle. "I've been watching. I know the mistakes you made." Cormac handed her the weapon, then picked up the ejected casing from where it had bounced off her horn. "Same drill. 1 round. Mechanical action. Actual recoil. Try not to become a cautionary tale." Lysandra examined the rifle with those violet eyes, her bronze skin's metallic undertones shifting through analysis colors. She worked the bolt on her first try, smooth and efficient, loaded the round without fumbling, brought the rifle to her shoulder with textbook form that Cormac had to admit was pretty good for someone who'd never held one before. "The key," she said, her voice slightly muffled by the stock, "is understanding that this weapon is operating on classical mechanics, Newtonian physics. I just need to account for the momentum transfer and maintain structural stability during the discharge." "Sure," Cormac said, "or you could just hold on tight." Lysandra found her sight picture faster than Tavish had. Her breathing was controlled, her stance was solid. She looked for a moment like she actually knew what she was doing. Then she pulled the trigger instead of squeezing it. The rifle fired. The bullet went wide, punching a hole in a ceiling panel that definitely wasn't supposed to have holes in it. Lysandra maintained her stance for approximately half a second before the recoil surprise hit her, and she stumbled backward 3 steps, her midnight hair flying. The rifle stayed mostly on target through sheer determination, but her bronze skin had flashed through white, gold, copper, and something that looked like confused mercury. Her horns were vibrating so hard they made a humming sound. "Classical mechanics," Tavish said smugly from where he was massaging his shoulder. "Newtonian physics, structural stability." "It jerked," Lysandra said, her voice slightly higher than normal. Her violet eyes were very wide. "The entire weapon jerked. In my hands. Of its own accord. That's not supposed to happen. Weapons don't jerk." "This one does," Cormac said, taking the rifle back. "That's what makes it fun." "Fun," she repeated. Her bronze skin was cycling through colors like it couldn't decide which emotion to display. That was the opposite of fun. That was violence pretending to be a tool. That was barely controlled chaos in a metal tube. "So you understand the appeal." Lysandra opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the rifle, looked at the new hole in the ceiling, looked back at Cormac. "Explain to me how this is better than a plasma rifle." "Didn't say it was better," Cormac said, walking back to the firing line. "Said you were making assumptions. You both assumed that because this technology is old, it's obsolete. You assumed that because your weapons are more sophisticated, they're more effective. You assumed that complexity equals superiority. He loaded another round, smooth and practiced. Brought the rifle up, acquired the target through the scope, breathed out, squeezed. The rifle fired with that universe-interrupting crack. Downrange, the holographic target registered a perfect center mass hit. Cormac worked the bolt, and the brass casing tinkled against the floor. Your plasma rifles need power cells. Your particle beams need cooling systems. Your graviton cannons need graviton generators, whatever those are. They're all dependent on supply chains and infrastructure and technology that can be disrupted. He loaded another round, fired again, another perfect hit. The motion was rhythmic, mechanical, almost meditative. This rifle, Cormac continued, working the bolt again, this rifle needs bullets and someone who knows how to use it. That's the entire supply chain. No power cells to run dry, no cooling systems to fail. No complex electronics to get fried by an EMP, just chemistry, physics, and a little bit of aim. Tavish's ears had slowly risen to a thoughtful forward angle. His amber eyes tracked the rifle's action. But the ammunition, you need to carry physical ammunition. That's a logistics problem. Smaller logistics problem than carrying spare power cells, Cormac pointed out. A case of ammunition takes up less space and weighs less than your plasma rifle's backup power supply. And bullets don't degrade over time like energy cells do. Lysandra had moved closer, her bronze skin's metallic undertones settling into a contemplative brushed brass. Her horns had stopped vibrating. And the penetration capability. You put a hole in our hard light barrier. Those are rated for energy weapons, Cormac finished, which they're designed to disperse and deflect. But a solid projectile? That's a different physics problem. All that kinetic energy focused on a tiny impact point. Shields don't know how to handle that. Armor has to be specifically designed for it. Most modern armor isn't, because most modern militaries forgot that ballistic weapons exist. He fired a third shot, another hit. The rhythm was almost musical now. Crack, chunk, clink, load, crack, chunk, clink, load. Tavish sat down on the floor, his lean frame folding with that desert-efficient movement. His claw-tipped fingers were flexing thoughtfully. We learned that kinetic projectiles were obsolete. Every military academy in the Galactic Federation teaches that energy weapons made them irrelevant. But that's not actually true, is it? It's true if everyone agrees it's true, Cormac said. Becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Everyone uses energy weapons, so everyone designs defenses for energy weapons, so energy weapons become the standard. But then someone shows up with a technology everyone forgot about, and suddenly all those defenses are useless. Lysandra's violet eyes had gone very sharp. That's not a lesson about weapons, that's a lesson about assumptions. Both, actually. Cormac safed the rifle and set it down. You two are going to be officers eventually. You're going to make tactical decisions. You're going to assess threats and deploy resources. And if you walk into every situation assuming that newer means better, that complex means superior, that everyone else thinks the same way you do, you're going to get surprised. And in combat, surprise gets people killed. The equipment locker's smell of gun oil and old leather seemed heavier now. In the weapons range beyond, the holographic targets continued their idle pattern. The crater in the barrier was still there, a physical reminder that sometimes physics doesn't care about technological advancement. Tavish was the first to speak. I want to learn this, properly, not just the shooting part, the philosophy part. Same, Lysandra added. Her bronze skin had settled into a determined copper. And I want to actually hit the target next time, without putting a hole in the ceiling. Maintenance will probably appreciate that, Cormac agreed. All right. Next session is Wednesday. Bring your plasma rifles. We're going to do a comparison test. Energy weapons versus ballistics across multiple scenarios. See which one is actually better in practical application. Which one is going to win? Tavish asked, his ears perked forward with genuine curiosity now rather than smugness. Cormac smiled. Depends on the scenario. That's the whole point. There's no perfect weapon. There's no obsolete weapon. There's just different tools for different problems. And the best warriors are the ones who know which tool to use when. He started packing up the rifle, the motion smooth and practiced. Behind him, he heard Tavish and Lysandra discussing ballistic coefficients and momentum transfer in low voices, their earlier mockery replaced with something that sounded like actual academic interest. In the hallway outside, footsteps approached. Probably the dean, coming to ask about the ceiling, or maintenance, coming to assess the damage, or more cadets, coming to see the human instructor's primitive weapon demonstration. Cormac didn't mind any of those options. The lesson had landed. Literally, in the case of the ceiling panel, and tomorrow he'd teach them about shotguns. That was going to be fun.